The Manhood Peninsula lies at the southern tip of Sussex, 10 miles east of Portsmouth. As with all low-lying areas, the coastline is vulnerable to flooding and erosion, and the west side of the peninsula is home to the fastest moving spit in England. However, these are not new problems, and the local community and relevant authorities have been coming to terms with the risks and implications of living next to the sea for many years now.
Rough weather at Selsey has brought to a head a big grievance of seafront inhabitants. Every year the sea encroaches more than 20 feet. And to the cost of the new seawall, they will have to contribute a big sum each. Two widowed sisters, Janet Parsons and Ella Pointer, are among the folk who think the demand is monstrous. Mrs. Parsons.
I came to Selsey 10 years ago and bought this bungalow for £2,850. And now the council want to charge me £2,500, which is absolutely ridiculous, and I cannot pay it.
If the wall isn't finished soon, it won't be much use arguing about who's going to pay. The sea will have had the last word.
50 years on, there is still confusion as to who should pick up the bill for coastal protection.
I had a couple phone me up 3 years ago and said, David, there's a little hole behind the sea wall. So I said, well, how big's this little hole behind the sea wall? He said, oh, about the size of a double-decker bus.
One morning when we woke up, we noticed that the gate that we had down to the beach was missing.
We were standing by the urn, and it was David Losey's comment, which was a little frightening, is that we might have to be evacuated if the erosion or if the storm took any more of the seawall away.
Well, I don't think we were in any doubt that it was the responsibility of Chichester District Council or the Environmental Agency.
There is a general assumption, or there has been a general assumption amongst the general population, that the local authority or the Environment Agency will pay for those defences. The fact is, it is not a duty, it is a power that these authorities have to carry out works, provided they're given the money.
However, given the current financial climate, money is only going to be less available to shore up defences, so maybe it's time for a new approach.
We're just recovering from a huge financial crisis, and to do that a lot of fiscal retrenchments needed. In other words, public expenditure has got to be reined in. We need to find ways to enable local people, perhaps mobilising their own resources and money, to protect themselves from incursion from the sea.
In spite of the best efforts of the relevant authorities, some residents still don't understand the risks of living by the sea.
Most people probably aren't aware of the risks that are out there, and that is because they don't know of the coastal plans and strategies that are out and about, and they don't know what those coastal plans and strategies say.
Somebody moving into a house generally is not aware of the risk they run. People don't want to know. There is an ostrich attitude to it, and they don't think there's a problem until something happens.
The community of Selsey, for example, in the last 30 years has grown enormously. So anybody living here would naturally think there is no risk, otherwise why would they be building houses here?
We have had lots of new houses sold down here in the last decade. It is reasonable for somebody coming along, buying a brand new house, to assume that the area is safe, and that isn't the case. You can't walk into a baker's and buy a loaf of bread that's out of date and not fit for human consumption. But you can buy a brand new house that is sitting in a flood zone.
So what information is actually available to help residents and buyers evaluate the risks of their properties?
On one level, where do you find out what plans, strategies and other things relate to your area? For some reason you can't go to a website and type in your postcode and find out what things are affecting you. Now if someone out there is saying, oh yes you can, then why doesn't someone like me know that?
Where I've been very disappointed in the past is with estate agents. Estate agents in coastal communities keen to sell a house, not so keen to say to a potential buyer, oh well of course that seawall's 40 years old now, it's probably only got 20 years and there's no guarantee it'll be repaired. They're not going to do that.
As an estate agent, if I have any information, I would provide it to any purchaser or vendor. The website I used when I was trying to investigate the flood erosion risks for Selsey was the Environment Agency website. I didn't find it very user-friendly. I found it time-consuming. it wasn't easy to navigate, and at one point it did freeze on me.
There are barriers to people picking up this information, and they centre around how many resources both the Environment Agency and the local authorities have to put to this task.
And there is some criticism that the information that is currently available can be difficult to understand.
Anything to do with the risk factor tends to be a lot of technical jargon which people can't follow. There tends to be an overload of information and not necessarily in straightforward English.
When we try and measure risk by saying it's 1 in 100 years, 1 in 200 years, people don't cotton on to it. And they automatically assume if that event has happened and we say, oh, it's a 1 in 100 years, they think, good-o, I've got another 100 years before it happens again.
If you present people with what the risks are, most people are perfectly capable of understanding that, for example, they live on a cliff top and the cliff is eroding, and at some point, if something isn't done, their house is going to fall into the sea. So it's pretty basic. I think if you're talking about risk, probability and a lot of technical matters, no, that's not going to be easy to understand. But do people really need to know that? Often people say to you, well, why are you telling me that? All I want to know is my house safe? And somehow you've got to convey very simply that sort of level of risk that's involved.
I think we're all perhaps naively confident that the Environment Agency will step in if there is a major issue regarding the sea defences.
As the impact of climate change increases the challenges our coastline faces, the finances available to deal with these issues is reducing. Coastal management is no longer just about building defences and seawalls. Solutions in the future will need to incorporate a range of options, with contributions from the public and private sectors, as well as communities and individuals. Managing the coast sustainably in the future will be as much about working with nature as it is about balancing the needs of the community, the environment, and the economy.